Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Sean Blackburn with Sweetfish Media. Joined today by Chris Meyer. He is the CEO of George P. Johnson. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Excited to have you on the show today. We're going to be talking about something that's very cool, I think, how B2B brands can use experience marketing to drive business goals. But before we begin, if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background and what it is you guys do over at George P. Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. George P. Johnson, we're a 104-year-old experience marketing company that was born out of Auburn Hills, Michigan, started in the automotive business. Today, we're about 2,000 associates operating around the world in 32 offices and work with many B2B brands to bring the power of experiences to their portfolio and ensure that we're designing and delivering experiences that emotionally connect consumers and customers, partners, the entire ecosystem with brands, and we're having a lot of fun. It's a good time to be an experiential, and it's looking forward to sharing a little bit about what we're doing at GPJ. Thank you.
Absolutely. And, being the CEO, what's been your background with GPJ and how did you get involved in experience marketing?
Yeah, I studied hospitality management at Cornell years ago, and then I was in the hotel business for a bit and started my own conference management agency out here in Silicon Valley, and eventually sold that to George P. Johnson, and that's how I got integrated to GPJ, and that was about year 2000. And since then, we have been focused on delivering success for our clients, and I've held roles in everything from running sales to overseeing our expansion into Asia. And obviously now in the CEO role, as out of George P. Johnson, we formed a holding company called Project Worldwide. So our chairman stepped into that, and I took the reins at GPJ about 5 years ago.
Fantastic. You mentioned it's an exciting time to be part of, the experience marketing industry. There is some special data that is showing B2B brands are shifting, a lot of their marketing budget. Maybe why do you think this is, and what do you think is driving that?
Yeah, you're right, Sean. I mean, a lot of the data and research recent from brands like Forrester and such are showing that brands are shifting a higher percentage of their overall marketing spend, particularly B2B brands, into experiential. Why is that? It's simple, because it's delivering success is one answer. The second answer is, I think, as the pendulum always swings, there's been so many things that have been gone digital that, quite frankly, they're not working. And there's too many distractions out there in the digital world. And whether you're swiping on your phone or watching television or other digital media, it's not providing the type of results. So, here comes, practice that's been well known as in the past as kind of events or event marketing, and now called experience management, where we're seeing brands that are investing significantly in creating powerful brand experiences are getting great business results from them. So you see those brands that see those results continue to invest and expand their experiential portfolios. And you have some amazing brands out there, like Salesforce is one, who's been really a leader in using experiences to not only drive their marketing tactics, but to drive their corporate strategy. So I think, I tell our teams a lot, we finally have moved from the kids' table to the adults' table, meaning that kind of events used to be a secondary marketing tactic, and now they're moving to a primary one. And that does bring with it some adult responsibilities in how we design and how we measure and how we produce these type of experiences. But end of the day, it's because they're working and the other marketing tactics are not.
Yes. Well, what are some of those trends that you are seeing in experiential marketing that are changing as compared to a few years back?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a couple things that really are driving a lot of maturation and transformation of a lot of events. And I'll start with data. As data becomes more usable to us in this particular practice, meaning that we can use data to better measure the return, but we can also better use data to personalize the experience, especially when you're dealing with large scale experiences. How do we make them feel more personal? So the ability to use data following proper privacy rules is number one of the trends that's evolving for us. Number two is that we're seeing events become larger. We're seeing brands. IBM is a good example. IBM in the last couple of years consolidated a number of their external-facing events into one large program called IBM Think, and that kind of model of taking disparate events, conferences, and combining them into one large-scale brand experience is also a trend. We're seeing that in many verticals. I would also say that the trend of looking at developing these events into almost as a studio. Yeah, they may be a large scale experience happening in a certain location over 4 or 5 days, with whether it's 5,000 people or 50,000 people. But what I think brands have figured out, and we as at George B. Johnson have figured out, is that look at that experience as really a studio to generate content, because the investment of straight dollars and time that goes into developing the content, both from the brand host as well as the rest of the ecosystem, is invaluable. And so we're finally seeing brands understand that and are able to then take content that comes out of these events and chop it up and reuse it throughout their marketing effort, digital and otherwise, throughout the year. So as opposed to an event being looked at historically as a point in time, it's now looked at both a point in time as well as an area where we can generate content to fuel the marketing strategy throughout the year.
Yeah, I think that's a super strategic way to be thinking through maximizing the budget that you are spending on an experience marketing program and, really dripping that out throughout the year, I think is an excellent way to do that. In another interview, I heard you speak about the world kind of becoming a hybrid when it comes to digital and actual live experiences. I thought it was a fascinating concept. Could you unpack a little bit for us your thinking on that?
Yeah, it's the world has become hybrid, and so if you think about events now, there always needs to be a layover strategy of how do we take that content and broadcast it. Whether you're dealing with independent consultants in a multi-level marketing organization, or whether you just want to get more views or a halo effect at the highest level, or whether it's driving a specific leads, etc. By converting again, using the event as a studio metaphor, by really laying a television broadcast format over it, where you're doing real-time editing, real-time commentary, et cetera. And I often relate it to the Super Bowl, right? Let's take the Olympics. Let's take the best, everything going on at an Olympic program and bring that together into a television program. That's different than it was in the past, meaning that in the past, we would take maybe a feed from a keynote and do a webcast or a simple broadcast. Now what's happening is that we're actually kind of producing a high-level television-level broadcast that may feature elements that are specific to the remote viewers. But what it does, it really better represents the brands, more targeted, and it creates content, again, that can be leveraged throughout. So when we consult with our clients looking at any type of experience, one of the first questions always is, okay, how are we going to leverage that content beyond the facility that we're hosting the event in? And what are our targets to reach or achieve in that methodology?
I think that's fascinating. And, kind of one thing that I did think about overall, and there's research out there that shows that experience marketing is huge with the millennial generation as they move more into decision-making roles, especially in B2B experiences. What sort of role do you think that might play? Do you see experience marketing continuing to grow and become more important in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen the little the memes and books and such written on the experience economy, and I think we're finally there. And you do see, particularly the younger generation wanting to invest more, whether it's in personal time or business time or just learning in more experiences. And that's another driver is why we've seen kind of increased investment in experiences, because the end of the day, that audience segment, that's what they want. They want to experience the brand. So whether that is something that is using to educate yourself about a vehicle, if it's automotive, or whether you're learning about new technology or new methodologies, to be able to experience the brand as well as the ecosystem around that is becoming critical in the planning of portfolios for major brands. So yes, the demographics has a huge impact on the importance of experiential.
You mentioned also that there's a shifting kind of seat at the table for experience marketing. With that, there are new expectations that maybe weren't there before. Now, how do you think that compares to some of the other traditional marketing disciplines, similar to PR, regular advertising, or traditional advertising, I should say? Where does experience marketing kind of fit within that realm?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think those, quite frankly, they're simpler to measure, and there's formal processes and tools and third parties that have been in place to provide kind of ROI metrics on things like television viewing, et cetera. Or digital is obviously looking at click-throughs, et cetera. In experiential, there's so many more components and dynamics to it, meaning that you have so many different interactions that may happen around an experience that they become harder to measure. But as you said, when you talk about the maturation of experiential, it does put the burden on us as experienced marketers. How do we measure it? And as I articulated earlier, we're now starting to have the tools and the data to be able to provide better metrics. And I think eventually what we'll see here is more standards, kind of like you see in digital marketing and in television or advertising, that are associated with event portfolios that can be used across the industry. In the meantime, we are focused with our clients to clearly understand what are the objectives and then how do we measure against them. Again, if it's awareness versus sales or lead generation, just clearly articulating what the expected results are so that we can measure against them.
Yeah. So maybe what's one of the practical ways that you've seen a company do that? We've got a lot of people in the audience who certainly go to trade shows, have a live component, an experience component to their marketing efforts. As somebody who's listening and maybe hasn't really given experience marketing a seat at the table, what's some encouragement that you would have for them as they're approaching this in maybe a new way?
Yeah, the first thing would be to identify what the actual spend is. We find with a lot of brands that they actually can't answer that question. What is your spend on experiential? And a lot of times they can't answer that because that spend is diversified throughout their organization. So the first thing is really getting a grasp on what is our spend today. Second of all, looking at the portfolio and ensuring that there is also a view to what the portfolio looks like to go along with the spend. So starting with that baseline, here's what we're spending today, and here's where we're spending it or how we're spending it. Then we can step back and say, what is it that is our purpose here? What are we actually trying to accomplish? Are we trying to better align with product, with specific markets, et cetera? And what are we trying to accomplish as far as tied into metrics on sales goals or sales impact or things like that? So you'd be surprised how many brands don't actually know what the spend is, know what their portfolio looks like, and know what their objectives are. So if we can help them identify the spend, put specific portfolio to align to their objectives in place, that's number one. And then number two is, as we then apply the right strategic thinking, again, you compare to kind of a traditional other marketing tactics, you'd be surprised how many times there's not a brief for an event, i.e., it's difficult for a brand to actually articulate what is the brief, what are we trying to accomplish. So just adding some maturity in the front end kind of strategic planning or strategy and planning discipline that you would see if you were doing a television campaign, as an example. So taking those same disciplines and applying them into experiential, starting with the strategy, then leading into the creative, then obviously into the production and delivery of it. So to me, it's about understanding what you have today, what do you want it to be, and then how do we apply the right disciplines to ensure that we're delivering amazing brand experiences that are powerful for the guest as well as providing business results for the brand.
I love that. Great advice. And one of the things that I'm super curious about, because I know that you see so much cool stuff. What's one of the cooler experiences that you've seen in, let's say, the past 6 months?
I'm probably biased, but I think Salesforce Dreamforce, since it's a project we work on, but I also, I have to give it to their founder and chairman, Mark Benioff. I mean, he built that company using experiential as a foundation. And what Dreamforce has turned into is, really kind of the first true kind of corporate festival that not only delivers results for that brand, but also delivers results for their entire ecosystem, as well as a significant CSR delivery relevant to providing back to the community and other causes. So I think the multiple dimensions that are part of that experience, and that's also a brand that does a great job on the measurement and the metrics we talked about, as well as being able to leverage the content created out of that experience. And from my perspective, they actually use Dreamforce as their the lead for their corporate strategy, not just their marketing strategy. And so I think we're going to continue to see brands mature and use experiences to drive business value that transcends what they historically think about an event as. And that's exciting for us, and it's an exciting time for Experiential.
All right, today's growth story is about search engine marketing. Clear Company is an HR tech company that was doing a lot of things right. Their messaging was clear, their product produced incredible results, but they were struggling to drive qualified traffic to their website. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first 12 months of working with Directive, Clear Company was able to increase their qualified lead volume by 157%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Chris, there's a lot of people that are shifting from some more traditional, marketing efforts, whether it be television, digital, and they are moving into experience marketing. What is the creative process like when it comes to making these campaigns that people are coming up with and wanting to actually execute it in the experience marketing realm?
Yeah, I love that question because it happens to us all the time. We have a lot of respect, and we work with a lot of kind of above the line agencies who may be doing high level brand strategy or brand creative or campaigns, as well as in-house agencies at the brand side. And our job typically is to collaborate with both other agencies as well as the internal creative or brand team, and be able to translate that into experiential. And that's an art that isn't well understood beyond folks that live in experiential, because you have to be able to understand how that's going to be physically produced in a safe way and engineered in a way that's going to be certified by fire marshals, et cetera. So, but at the end of the day, it's really about collaboration. It's about our teams understanding the brand and understanding related campaigns, and then collaborating really effectively with in-house creative and other agencies to understand and work collaboratively to build out the creative plan that's based on the overall strategy. But I would say the biggest takeaway is that creative shouldn't be done in isolation relevant to experiential. It's something that should be done in collaboration and partnership with above the line agencies as well as internal creative.
Absolutely. GPJ does a lot of work in the automotive vertical. There's a lot of disruption that's going on there. What's your point of view when it comes to, experiential and the importance for some automotive brands? And we know that there are B2B brands that are moving into the automotive industry as well.
Yeah, as you say, and I think this would apply to any industry that's going through, disruption or great innovation, like we're seeing in automotive as the industry becomes electrified and more autonomous. What we're seeing is it's interesting. It's because you think about automotive is kind of B2C, but to your point, you see many tech brands and startups that are operated more B2B, kind of mashing up with automotive brands, and how that relates to experiences. In the old days, we would be kind of delivering shows or events that really were about showing automobiles and letting people see the automobiles. In some cases, get inside them, but in many cases, just seeing them. And what we're seeing now is a lot of the principles we've talked about today, as far as how do we use data, what's our strategy, how do we design the right experience, how do we create an opportunity for the audience to have an experience, right? All these same principles apply into the automotive vertical, or again, any vertical for that say, but ones that are going through disruption. I think the ability to use experiential to tell the story, when you think about something like autonomy or going electric, creating an experience where people can get in the vehicle and understand that, whether it's a digital experience or whether it's actually a ride and drive type experience, that's what's going to drive the transformation of experiential in that particular vertical. But again, my takeaway too there is, as I look at our two primary verticals, which are automotive and IT, I see a lot more collaboration going on across industries like that than we've ever seen. And that's being done both at kind of the business level, the product level, as well as the marketing and experiential level. And for our teams, as we design experiences for our customers, we do now take a broader view and say, hey, how could a mashup of this brand, or how could this brand bring value to the experience? And that's helpful, relevant to funding, exposure, audience generation, et cetera.
I love it. Well, Chris, this has been a great conversation, and I certainly appreciate your perspective on how B2B brands can use experience marketing to drive business goals. Now, if anybody has any questions and wants to follow up with you and connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn is the best way to do that, or email me at chris.meyer@gpj.com.
Perfect. Well, Chris, thanks again for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Sean, thank you for the time. Appreciate it, and look forward to talking soon.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.